My wife wiped out our son's college fund and ran off with her boyfriend. Then my 10-year-old son said. As Ethan sat in the dim kitchen, the weight of betrayal settled over him. The empty college fund, the echoing silence of his wife's departure. It all felt like an endless, hollow ache. He watched Liam, his 10-year-old son, quietly dismantling a toy robot at the kitchen table. The boy's fingers moved with an eerie precision, every twist of the screwdriver a reminder of how much he had lost and how young he still was. "Dad?" Liam's voice broke the silence, soft but steady. "I fixed it." Ethan blinked, confusion breaking through the fog of his thoughts. "Fixed what, buddy?" "The college fund." Liam's green eyes lifted to meet his father's, calm and unblinking. "I moved the money back. Mom didn't think I knew her passwords, but I did. I made sure the bank flagged her account too. They'll find her soon." A chill ran through Ethan, his breath catching in his throat. "Liam, how did you—" Liam shrugged, his small shoulders rising and falling with a nonchalance that belied his age. "You always said we had to take care of each other, right? So I did. She tried to take my future, but I wasn't going to let her." In that moment, Ethan saw it, the steel beneath his son's quiet demeanor, the resilience forged from betrayal. His son wasn't just surviving, he was fighting back, reclaiming their lives one calculated move at a time. And for the first time since his world had shattered, Ethan felt something bloom in his chest. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please drop a 1 in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear this story. Your support helps keep our channel going strong. Ethan Porter had always found comfort in routine. His mornings typically began with the soft hum of the coffee maker and the rhythm of Liam's pencil as it danced across his homework. Their small, sunlit kitchen in Portland, Oregon, was the kind of place where mornings felt safe, where the world seemed manageable. It was a Tuesday like any other, or so Ethan thought. At 42, Ethan had built a stable life as an accountant. His job wasn't glamorous, but it allowed him to provide for his 10-year-old son. Since his wife Sarah started traveling more for work, Ethan had become the steady hand guiding their little household. He'd learned to braid Liam's hair for school pictures, to cheer the loudest at his soccer games, and to cook a half-decent lasagna, all the things he never thought he'd need to master. "Dad, how do you spell adventure?" Liam's voice pulled Ethan back to the present. The boy sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by a scatter of colored pencils and a half-finished drawing of a superhero with wild red hair and a cape too large for his tiny frame. "Just like it sounds, buddy." Ethan smiled, ruffling Liam's dark curls as he passed. He set a steaming mug of coffee on the table next to him. "What's this guy's superpower?" Liam grinned, his green eyes bright. "He can fix anything. No matter how broken, he always finds a way." Ethan chuckled, a gentle warmth blooming in his chest. "I like that. Sounds like a good guy to have around." But then, amidst the quiet comfort of their morning, Ethan's phone buzzed on the counter. He reached for it, expecting nothing more than a work email or a reminder about an overdue bill. Instead, a notification stared back at him. "Your account balance has fallen below the minimum threshold." His thumb hovered over the screen, a creeping unease settling in his gut. Ethan clicked into the banking app, his coffee cooling in the mug he suddenly couldn't bring to his lips. What he saw didn't make sense. The college fund, the account he had spent 6 years building, dollar by careful dollar, was empty. Not low, not mistaken, completely wiped out. Ethan's pulse thudded in his ears, and the cozy warmth of the kitchen seemed to drain away. As Liam continued coloring his hero, Ethan's world quietly began to unravel. Ethan's fingers moved quickly, more out of habit than clear thought. He logged into the college fund account again, staring at the glaring zero on the screen. His mind raced to make sense of it. A bank error, maybe? Systems glitched all the time. There had to be an explanation. He scrolled through the transaction history, his heart hammering against his ribs. The list of transactions loaded slowly, each entry like a stone dropping into a still lake. Ethan's pulse quickened as he read through them, withdrawals in large, neat sums, $5,000, $10,000, even a $15,000 transfer to an unfamiliar account. His thumb swiped down the screen, the withdrawals bleeding the account dry over the past month. No, 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 he muttered, rubbing his eyes as if clearing his vision might change what he saw. He tried to focus on the details. The transactions weren't just for transfers, there were charges too. Airline tickets, luxury hotel reservations, fine dining restaurants. The kind of places Ethan had only ever seen on TV or in ads that popped up while he streamed free movies. His breathing grew shallow. The pit of his stomach felt hollow and cold. He pressed the call button next to Sarah's name. It rang twice before cutting straight to voicemail. "Sarah, call me back. Something's wrong with the college fund. I need to talk to you." He hung up, his own voice sounding foreign and thin. He dialed again. Voicemail. Again, nothing. And Liam looked up from his drawing. "Dad, are you okay?" Ethan forced a smile, the corners of his mouth tight. "Yeah, buddy, everything's fine. Just grown-up stuff." Liam seemed to accept this, turning back to his artwork, but Ethan could see a faint shadow of concern in his son's eyes. He stood up, his phone still clutched in his hand. He moved through the house on autopilot, checking for signs of Sarah's presence. Her keys weren't on the hook by the door. The black leather purse she always slung over the chair was gone. He pushed open the closet door. One side looked bare. Half of her clothes were missing. Ethan stumbled back a step, the world tilting. He remembered how Sarah had been leaving the house more often lately. The late-night work meetings, the weekends away to clear her head. He had believed her. Why wouldn't he? They had been through rough patches before, but nothing like this. He opened their shared credit card account on his phone, his hands trembling. The screen filled with charges that painted a clear picture. The expensive hotels were in Miami, and the flights were booked under her name. Dinners for two, spa treatments, a boutique jewelry store. The receipts detailed a life of indulgence, one she had chosen to live without him. He called her again, straight to voicemail. His mind raced, a brutal montage of recent weeks, the way she'd been dressing up more, her phone always tilted away when he walked by, her smile a little too bright, a little too forced. The clues were all there, but he had been too blind, too trusting to see them. "Damn it, Sarah!" He leaned against the wall, the cool paint grounding him as his knees threatened to buckle. He thought of Liam sitting just a room away, his son, who still believed his mom was on a business trip, who had no idea his entire future had just been stolen. Ethan felt a wave of nausea rise up, a mix of rage and betrayal so intense it made him dizzy. Memories flooded back, the nights he'd stayed up late, reworking their budget to keep the college fund growing, the times he'd skipped lunches, taken on side gigs, all to ensure Liam would have a better start in life. The promise he had made to himself the day Liam was born, that no matter what, he would make sure his son never struggled the way he had. All of it gone. He tried Sarah's number one more time, his thumb bruising the screen. Voicemail. The robotic, indifferent message only deepened his sense of abandonment. "Sarah, I need you to call me back right now," he said, his voice raw. "I don't know what's going on, but I need to talk to you." "Liam, he's asking about you. Please, just call me." When he hung up, the silence in the house seemed to close in on him. Ethan slid down to the floor, his back against the wall. His phone lay in his lap, the screen dark. The weight of what he had just uncovered pressed down on him, suffocating. He wanted to smash something, to shatter glass or wood, to make the outside world match the destruction he felt inside. But he couldn't. Liam was still in the kitchen, blissfully unaware. Ethan had to hold it together. He had to find a way to breathe, to think, to act. But for a moment, just a moment, he let himself sink into the darkness, his fingers digging into the carpet, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Everything he had built, everything he had worked for had been swept away in a tide of betrayal, and he had no idea what to do next. Ethan sat at the edge of his bed, the room around him frozen in time. He stared at the half-empty closet, Sarah's side a patchwork of wire hangers and empty shelves. How had he not seen this coming? His mind churned through the last few months, every memory suddenly painted with suspicion. There were the work trips that seemed to pop up overnight. Sarah would pack a small suitcase, throw on a casual excuse about a client meeting, and disappear for days. At first, he had admired her drive. She'd always been ambitious, and he'd wanted to support her career. But looking back, the details didn't add up. The calls she wouldn't take in front of him, the way her phone was always face down on the counter, the times she'd slip into the bathroom to answer a text, returning with a smile that never reached her eyes. Ethan's skin prickled with a rising heat. He thought of the nights he'd sat up, waiting for her to come home, thinking she was just overwhelmed by work. He'd even started making excuses for her. She's under a lot of pressure. She just needs some space. The reality settled over him like a heavy blanket. He hadn't wanted to see the truth, because the truth hurt too much. The small things that seemed like quirks were now red flags waving in his face. Her growing impatience with Liam, the way she seemed to drift through their home like a guest. Even the meals she cooked, once a labor of love, had turned into takeout containers and forgotten leftovers. She was slipping away, and he had watched it happen in real time, completely blind. A sharp knock at the door jolted him back. "Dad?" Liam's voice was soft, but it carried through the silence. Ethan wiped his eyes quickly, the salt of tears he hadn't realized he'd shed. "Yeah, buddy. What's up?" Liam stepped into the room, his small frame outlined by the soft hallway light. He held his drawing, now complete. The superhero's cape billowed an imagined wind, his red hair wild, eyes focused, strong, unyielding. "I finished it," Liam said, holding up the picture. "What do you think?" Ethan forced a smile, his throat tight. "It's awesome, kiddo. He looks brave." "He is," Liam said, his expression serious. "He doesn't let bad guys win." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. "That's good. We need more heroes like that." Liam sat beside him, their shoulders touching. His presence was a lifeline, an anchor keeping Ethan from drifting too far into his own despair. Despite his age, there was something solid about Liam, a quiet strength that Ethan hadn't noticed before. "Is Mom okay?" Liam asked, his voice carefully neutral. Ethan hesitated, his words catching on the truth. She had to go away for a while." Liam nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "She took her suitcase." Ethan's chest tightened. "Yeah, she did." Silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Then, in a voice too calm for a 10-year-old, Liam said, "She's not coming back, is she?" Ethan opened his mouth to protest, to lie, to soften the blow, but the truth was a wall he couldn't climb over. "I don't know, buddy." Liam looked down at his drawing, his fingers brushing over the colored pencil lines. "It's okay," he said finally. "I think we'll be fine." The words settled around them, and Ethan felt both comforted and unnerved. His son's calmness was a mirror to his own chaos, reflecting back something he couldn't quite name. Liam didn't cry, didn't lash out. He just accepted it, the way a grown man might, with quiet resignation. Ethan wrapped an arm around Liam, pulling him close. His son's head rested against his chest, and for a moment, the world outside their small room fell away. But beneath the calm, a new worry began to unfurl. What had Liam seen? What did he know? And how had he learned to bear the weight of betrayal without breaking? As they sat there, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his son understood more than he let on. And that truth, above all, filled him with a fear he couldn't name. Liam remained still against Ethan's side, his small body radiating a warmth that felt both grounding and fragile. Ethan held on tightly, his mind still spinning with the shock of Sarah's betrayal. The college fund, the empty closet, the unanswered calls, all of it swirled around him like debris in a storm. He couldn't find his footing. After a while, Liam pulled away, his expression still calm. "Dad, it's fine," he said, his voice steady and low. "I fixed everything." Ethan blinked, his thoughts too tangled to process what Liam had said. "What do you mean, buddy?" Liam shrugged, his face a mask of composure. "You don't have to worry, I took care of it." Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came. His brain latched onto the wrong details. Liam's even tone, the casual way he spoke, it was the voice of a child, but the weight behind it was unsettling. Like he wasn't a 10-year-old boy, but someone much older, someone who had already seen the world break and had stitched it back together himself. "That's good, kiddo," Ethan managed to say, his own voice scraping against the tightness in his throat. "I'm glad you're okay." Liam nodded, his eyes holding a flicker of something unreadable. He stood up and walked back to the kitchen, his footsteps soft on the hardwood floor. Ethan stayed where he was, the silence pressing down on him, His mind latched on to the chaos, the empty bank account, the missing clothes, the icy void of Sarah's voicemail. The weight of it all pressed him down, and he let it. There were too many questions, too many broken pieces to try to put back together. What had gone wrong? How had he missed it? It wasn't until much later, long after Liam had gone to bed and the house had settled into its nighttime stillness, that Ethan's mind circled back to what his son had said. "I fixed everything." A chill crept up his spine, the quiet echo of Liam's words settling into the corners of his thoughts. He pushed it away, convincing himself that his son was just trying to help, to be brave. But the feeling lingered. Something about Liam's calmness, his certainty, sat wrong. And somewhere in the back of Ethan's mind, a small, persistent voice whispered that his son wasn't just being brave, he was being something else entirely. Ethan stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window into the rain-soaked backyard. The world outside felt distant, muffled by the weight in his chest. He hadn't heard from Sarah since the day he discovered the empty college fund. Her phone went straight to voicemail, her social media accounts were untouched, and every trace of her in the house felt like a shadow that refused to fade. He had stopped calling days ago, his messages trailing off from anger to confusion to a hollow kind of acceptance. The phone rang, jolting him out of his trance. He glanced at the screen and froze. Her name blinked back at him, the letters too familiar, too sharp against the glow. For a second he considered letting it ring. What could she possibly say that would make this right? But before he could think it through, his thumb swiped across the screen and the call connected. "Sarah?" His voice cracked, a raw edge to his tone that he couldn't hide. "Oh my God, Ethan." Her voice was thin, barely more than a whisper. "You have to help me." His grip tightened around the phone, knuckles white. "Help you? You emptied our son's college fund and disappeared. What kind of help are you expecting?" I know, she stammered. "I messed up. I didn't mean for this to happen." "What exactly did you mean to happen, Sarah? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you stole everything and ran off with some guy." Her breath hitched, the sound uneven and desperate. "It's not like that. I mean, it was, but it's all gone wrong." "Gone wrong?" He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You think this is just a mistake? You wiped out our son's future. You left us." "I didn't know what else to do," she said, her words tumbling over each other. "Nick said he'd take care of everything. He promised. But now he's gone. His accounts are frozen. And mine too. I have nothing, Ethan. The police, they're looking for me." His mind snagged on the details, pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit. Why are the police involved? What did you do, Sarah? "It was Nick's idea," she said, her voice a thin wire pulled too tight. "He had this plan, some kind of investment scheme. I thought it was legitimate, but now everyone's saying it was fraud, that I helped him. But I didn't know." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You didn't know? You expect me to believe that? You stole from our son. You packed your bags and left. You knew enough to do that." "Please," she begged, a sob breaking through. "I'm stuck in Miami. I have no money, no ID, nothing. I need you to help me get out of this." "What do you think I can do, Sarah? I can't unfreeze your accounts. I can't make Nick come back. I thought maybe you could send me something, just enough to get me home. I need to fix this, Ethan, for Liam." At the mention of their son's name, a cold fury settled into him. "You don't get to say his name. You gave up that right when you walked out." Silence filled the line, a heavy pause that stretched on. When she spoke again, her voice was small. "I know I hurt you. I know I hurt Liam. But I didn't think it would end like this. I thought I'd finally be happy." Ethan pressed his palm to his forehead, the coolness of his skin grounding him. "Happy? You destroyed everything for a fantasy, and now you expect me to save you?" "I don't have anyone else," she whispered. "Please, Ethan, I made a mistake." A rustle behind him made him turn. Liam stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. The phone was still pressed to Ethan's ear, Sarah's breathing a faint echo against the silence. "Who is it?" Liam asked, his voice steady. "It's your mom." Liam didn't react, his face a mask. "Put it on speaker." "Liam." "Please, Dad, trust me." Ethan hesitated, then hit the speaker button. Sarah's voice filled the room, thin and brittle. "Liam, sweetheart, it's Mommy." Liam's eyes narrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. What do you want? Baby, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. You stole from me, he said evenly. You took my college fund and ran away. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. I was trying to start over. I thought I could make things better for us. For us? You mean for you? You didn't care about us. You left. I know. And I'm sorry, I need you to understand. No, Liam interrupted, his voice cold. I don't need to understand anything. You chose him. You chose yourself. Now you're on your own. Liam, please, she sobbed. I'm begging you. I need help. Liam looked up at Ethan, his expression as calm as ever. You always said actions have consequences. I guess now she gets to learn what that means. Ethan felt a shiver run through him. Liam's words were sharp, too precise. He found himself nodding, his own anger mirrored in his son's eyes. You heard him, Sarah. You made your bed. Now lie in it. The line went dead, the silence swallowing them whole. Liam turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone in the kitchen, the weight of his son's words hanging in the air. Liam's expression didn't change as Sarah's voice crackled through the phone on speaker. His calmness felt unnatural, a stillness that made the room colder. Ethan watched his son with a mixture of awe and unease, his own anger now dwarfed by the quiet force in Liam's eyes. Liam, baby, please talk to me. Sarah's voice wavered, every syllable soaked in desperation. He didn't flinch. Why? So you can lie to me again? Her breath hitched on the other end. I never meant to hurt you. I thought. You thought what? Liam's tone cut through her excuses. That I wouldn't notice? That Dad wouldn't find out? You stole my future, Mom. You took everything. Ethan felt a sting behind his eyes, a mix of pride and heartbreak. He had expected Liam to be hurt, maybe even to cry, but this quiet fury was something else. I know, Sarah sobbed. I was just trying to make things better. I thought Nick would help us. I thought we could start over. With my college fund? Liam's voice remained level, a stark contrast to her unraveling. You didn't take that money for us. You took it for you. To run away with him. It wasn't like that. I was scared. I didn't know what else to do. Liam's lips pressed into a thin line. You had a choice, and you chose yourself. You left us. The line went silent for a moment. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was small, a crack in the wall she had built around her guilt. I made a mistake. I know that now. But I'm still your mom. I love you. No, you don't. Liam's words were as sharp as broken glass. You love yourself. And now that Nick's gone, you're just scared. You're not sorry. You're desperate. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to step in, to soften the blows, but he couldn't move. His son had taken the lead, guiding the conversation with a precision that left no room for doubt. Liam, please, Sarah whispered. I need you. No, he said, his voice clear and unshaken. You needed me when you had nothing left, but I needed you when you had everything and you left. And the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was final. Liam met his father's gaze, the weight of his words settling between them. And in that moment, Ethan saw not just his son, but a boy who had grown up too fast, too hard. A boy who had learned to hold the truth like a weapon and use it without mercy. Ethan sat at the dining table, his hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee. The house was quiet except for the soft clicking of keys coming from the living room. He turned slowly, the sound drawing him like a thread pulled taut. Liam sat on the couch, his tablet balanced on his knees, fingers moving with practiced precision. Liam? Ethan's voice was rough, worn thin by exhaustion. Liam didn't look up. Yeah? Dad? What are you doing? Just checking on something, he said, his tone as casual as if he were playing a game, but the screen was filled with code, lines of text that scrolled in a steady stream. Ethan rose slowly, the weight of the past days pressing down on his shoulders. He moved closer, peering over Liam's shoulder. The tablet displayed bank accounts, transactions, balances, a web of digital pathways that made no sense to him. His pulse quickened. Liam, what is this? Liam finally looked up, his expression calm and unreadable. It's Mom's accounts. And Nick's. Ethan's breath caught. How did you get into them? Liam shrugged as if it were nothing. She wasn't careful with her passwords. I found them on her phone. And Nick used the same ones everywhere. It was easy. The mug slipped from Ethan's hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. He barely noticed. You? Hacked into their accounts? Liam nodded, his focus already shifting back to the screen. I had to. They took our money. Ethan's mind struggled to keep up. His 10-year-old son had done what? Liam, that's illegal. So was stealing my college fund. Liam's voice was flat, a simple statement of fact. I just took it back. Ethan sank onto the couch beside him, his knees weak. You got the money back? Every penny. Liam swiped across the screen, pulling up a series of transactions. The account that had once been drained now showed a balance that brought tears to Ethan's eyes. $50,000, sitting right where it should have been. How? Ethan asked, his voice a whisper. I moved it back through a few dummy accounts. It'll look like a refund from a failed transaction, nothing to trace. Liam's fingers danced over the screen, the fluidity of his movements betraying hours of work. I also set up alerts. If they try to access anything else, the banks will freeze their accounts automatically. Ethan stared, the realization washing over him in slow, icy waves. His son wasn't just smart. He was methodical, calculated. Liam, why didn't you tell me? Liam's green eyes met his. Because you would have stopped me. Ethan couldn't argue. The depth of his son's planning was unnerving. But there was more, something darker lurking beneath the surface. What else did you do? Liam hesitated, his fingers pausing mid-gesture. I sent everything I found to the police. The emails, the fake investment documents, the transactions. Nick's been scamming people for years. Mom helped him. Ethan's breath shuddered out of him. You reported them? Anonymously. I made sure the evidence led back to both of them. They won't be able to prove it was me. His voice didn't waver, the words delivered with a calm that sent chills down Ethan's spine. Liam, you understand what this means, right? Your mom, she could go to jail. She deserves to. Liam's expression hardened, a shadow passing over his young face. She chose Nick over us. She chose herself. This is just the consequence. Ethan wanted to protest, to say that no matter what, Sarah was still his mother, but the words stuck in his throat. Liam's logic was as flawless as it was merciless. There's more. Liam's voice softened, a hint of something vulnerable peeking through. I found messages. Nick was planning to take the money and run. Mom didn't know. He was using her too. Ethan's head throbbed, a deep ache between his eyes. What are you saying? I think he was going to leave her in the same mess he left us in. Only difference is I got ahead of him. Liam's fingers resumed their motion, closing windows, shutting down programs. By the time the police find him, he'll be broke and nowhere to hide. Ethan couldn't speak. He watched as Liam finished up, his movements precise, deliberate. The tablet screen went dark, and the room seemed to exhale around them. What happens now? Ethan finally asked. Liam set the tablet aside, folding his hands neatly in his lap. We wait. They'll figure it out. And when they do, it won't be our problem anymore. The finality of his words settled over them. Ethan knew he should feel relief, gratitude even, but all he felt was a deep, unsettling fear. His son had taken control of a situation no adult had been able to manage, had wielded justice like a blade. And for the first time, Ethan wasn't sure which side of that blade they were on. Ethan sat on the edge of the couch, his mind a tangle of emotions he couldn't quite sort through. Pride and fear twisted together, a tight coil in his chest. He looked at Liam, who sat quietly, his small hands folded in his lap, his expression a perfect mask of calm. It was this eerie composure that unnerved him most. A part of Ethan wanted to wrap his arms around his son, to tell him how proud he was of his quick thinking and his brilliance. Liam had done what no adult had managed. He had protected them, restored what was taken, and brought justice down on those who had wronged them. His intelligence was undeniable, his resourcefulness astonishing. But beneath the surface, there was something darker. Liam's voice had held no tremor. His hands had not shaken, and his eyes had remained dry. There was no hint of the confusion or sadness that should have been there. He had spoken about his mother's betrayal, about orchestrating her downfall, with a detachment that felt almost clinical. Ethan's chest tightened as he studied his son. Liam's actions weren't born of impulsiveness or even rebellion. They were methodical, deliberate. Every move he had made was with purpose, a strategy unfolding in layers only he could see. Ethan couldn't tell if he was more amazed or afraid. "Liam," he said gently, his voice a fragile thread in the quiet room, "you did all this because of what Mom did?" Liam nodded, a simple acknowledgement. "She took everything from us. I couldn't let her get away with it." The weight of those words pressed down on Ethan. "But you're only 10, buddy. It's not something you should have to handle." Liam looked at him, his green eyes clear and steady. "If I didn't do it, who would? You were sad, Dad. You couldn't see what needed to be done." The truth of it hit like a blow. Ethan had been paralyzed, trapped by his own heartbreak. Liam had stepped into the void, taking on the burden of their shattered world. But at what cost? Ethan's throat tightened. The line between protector and protected blurred beyond recognition. He reached out, his hand resting on Liam's shoulder, the gesture more for himself than for his son. "I'm sorry, Liam. I should have been there for you." Liam didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. "It's okay, Dad. I fixed it." The words echoed around them, a promise and a warning, and Ethan couldn't tell which one it was. It was late afternoon when the doorbell rang. Ethan tensed, a tight knot forming in his gut. They hadn't been expecting anyone, and the past few days had taught him to distrust the unexpected. He wiped his hands on a dish towel and glanced toward the living room, where Liam sat on the couch, his tablet resting on his knees. The boy didn't look up, his focus sharp and steady. "Stay here," Ethan said, his voice low. Liam gave a barely perceptible nod. Ethan approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. His blood ran cold. Nick stood on the porch, his face drawn and hollow, eyes rimmed with a manic desperation. His once polished appearance had frayed at the edges. Stubble darkened his jaw, and his clothes hung loose, wrinkled like he'd been sleeping in them. Ethan's first instinct was to lock every door, to grab Liam and run. But Nick must have sensed hesitation because he pounded on the door again, harder this time. "I know you're in there, Ethan." His voice was hoarse, ragged. "Open the door or I swear I'll break it down." Ethan's fingers hovered over the deadbolt. He knew what kind of man Nick was, charming when he needed to be, cruel when he thought no one could see. He took a steadying breath and cracked the door open, the chain still fastened. "What do you want?" Nick's lips twisted into a sneer. "I want what's mine." His eyes darted past Ethan, trying to see inside. "Where's the kid?" "You need to leave," Ethan said firmly. "There's nothing for you here." Nick leaned against the doorframe, his body a coiled spring. "You think you're clever? You think I don't know what you did? You and your little hacker. You ruined me." Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. "We didn't do anything. You made your own mess." Nick's hand slapped against the door, making it shudder. "You took my money. You reported me to the cops. You think you can just walk away from this?" Before Ethan could respond, Liam appeared at his side, his small frame a stark contrast to the tension in the doorway. "He said you need to leave." Nick's face twisted, an ugly mix of rage and fear. "You little brat. You think this is over? I'll make you regret it. Both of you." Liam didn't flinch. He slipped a hand into his pocket, his fingers brushing over something small and metallic. "You should go, Nick." His voice was eerily calm. "You're only making it worse." Nick's eyes narrowed. "I've got nothing left to lose, kid. You think I'm scared of you?" "No," Liam said, pulling a small device from his pocket and pressing a button. "But they will be." A red light blinked on the device, and Nick's threats echoed back through the tiny speaker. Every word he'd said since he arrived, recorded with perfect clarity. "What the hell is that?" Nick's bravado faltered. "It's evidence." Liam's fingers moved swiftly, connecting the device to his tablet. Within seconds, a progress bar appeared, the file uploading. "I've sent it to the police. They already have everything else. The fraud, the stolen money. This is just the last piece they needed." Nick stumbled back a step, his anger giving way to a raw, exposed panic. You can't do that." "It's done." Liam's expression never wavered. "You should leave before they get here." As if on cue, the distant sound of sirens cut through the air. Nick's shoulders slumped, the weight of his choices finally crashing down. His eyes darted between Ethan and Liam, his face crumbling. Without another word, he turned and fled down the driveway, disappearing into the maze of suburban streets. Ethan exhaled, the air rushing out of him in a shudder. He turned to Liam, words tangled in his throat. How did you know he would come?" Liam slipped the device back into his pocket. "I didn't, but I knew he wouldn't just give up." The sirens grew louder and blue and red lights flashed against the evening sky. Ethan wrapped his arm around Liam, pulling him close. The boy didn't resist, his body warm and solid against his side. "Is it over?" Ethan asked, more to himself than to his son. Liam's voice was soft but firm. "It is now." And for the first time in days, Ethan let himself believe it might be true. Flashing red and blue lights bathed the front of the house as police cars pulled up to the curb. Officers moved quickly, their voices a mix of commands and calm instructions. Nick barely made it to the sidewalk before they surrounded him, his hands going up in a gesture of surrender that looked more like a collapse. His bravado crumbled, the desperation bleeding through every movement. Ethan stood in the doorway, his arms still wrapped around Liam. He felt a surge of relief as Nick was cuffed and led away, his slumped figure a shadow of the man who had threatened them just moments before. The evidence Liam had provided was airtight. The recorded threats, the financial records, the trail of fraud and deceit. It all painted Nick into a corner he couldn't wriggle out of. One of the officers approached them, his expression a mix of professionalism and curiosity. "We received an anonymous tip along with the evidence. Do you know who sent it?" Ethan hesitated, the truth too tangled to explain, but Liam stepped forward, his voice steady. "It was me." The officer raised an eyebrow, glancing at Ethan, who managed a nod. "My son. He's the one who uncovered everything." The officer crouched down to Liam's level, a hint of a smile breaking through his serious demeanor. "That was some impressive work, kid. You helped us catch a dangerous man." Liam didn't smile back. He wasn't going to stop. "I just made sure he couldn't hurt us anymore." Ethan's stomach twisted. There was no pride in Liam's voice, no satisfaction, just a simple, cold acceptance of what he had done. The officer stood, giving Ethan a nod. "We'll need you to come down to the station to make a statement, but I think we've got everything we need." As the police cars pulled away, Nick's figure disappearing behind tinted glass, the street fell back into its quiet, suburban calm. The danger was over, the threat neutralized. Ethan wanted to feel safe. He wanted to believe that they could finally breathe again. But as he looked down at Liam, his son, who had just orchestrated the downfall of a grown man, he couldn't shake a deeper unease. There was no question that justice had been served, but the way Liam had delivered it, the methodical, detached precision, left a chill in the air. It wasn't just Nick who had shown his true colors, and for the first time, Ethan wondered if he truly understood the boy standing beside him. A week after Nick's arrest, Ethan found himself sitting in a dimly lit office at the police station. The room smelled faintly of stale coffee and dust, the kind of scent that clung to old secrets. Detective Morales sat across from him, a man with kind eyes and a hard-set mouth. A thick folder lay between them, its edges worn, the contents too heavy for the thin paper binding. "We've been going through everything," Morales said, his voice steady but edged with caution. "Emails, texts, financial records. There's more to the story than we initially thought." Ethan braced himself, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Just tell me." Morales opened the folder, spreading out documents and printouts. Some were financial statements, others were emails with subject lines like final preparations and new beginnings. He tapped a photograph, a shot of Sarah and Nick in a hotel lobby, their faces close, a shared secret hanging between them. "It wasn't just about the money," Morales said. "Sarah and Nick had plans, big ones. She wasn't just running away with him, she was taking Liam with her." Ethan's breath caught, his mind struggling to connect the words to reality. "What do you mean? She was going to take him?" Morales nodded, his expression softening. They had documents ready, forged IDs, paperwork to change Liam's name. Nick had connections, people who could help them disappear. They planned to introduce Liam as Nick's son, cut off all ties to you, to his real life. The room seemed to close in around Ethan, the walls pressing in with every breath. His mind flashed through memories. The time Sarah had taken Liam on those so-called special trips, the stories she had told him about wanting a fresh start, her insistence that Liam needed more stability. He had thought she was just struggling, that maybe she was lost and looking for a way back. He had never imagined this. They wanted to build a new life, Morales continued, his voice a steady drumbeat. In Miami, they had already rented an apartment under Nick's name. Sarah had enrolled Liam in a private school, not as Liam Porter, but as Evan Taylor. She was trying to erase him. The name hit Ethan like a punch. His hands gripped the edge of the chair, the hard plastic biting into his palms. His son, his Liam, turned into someone else, a stranger. His heartbreak morphed into something hotter, sharper, a protective rage that burned through the disbelief. She was going to take him from me, he said, his voice low and rough. Not just physically. She wanted to take away who he was. Yes, Morales said gently, it appears that way. Ethan's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of the past months. The whispered phone calls, the sudden trips, the way she had started pulling away from their family routines. She hadn't been running from a bad marriage. She had been building a new one, a new family, without him. And the money she had stolen wasn't just for luxury. It was to fund the life she planned to create with Nick. Did Liam know? Ethan's voice cracked, the possibility too painful to consider. We don't think so, Morales said, but he might have sensed something. Kids are perceptive, especially ones as smart as Liam. Ethan exhaled, his breath shaky. He had seen his son's calmness as strength, but now he wondered if it had been something else. A defense, a way to survive the quiet unraveling of his world. Liam had known something was wrong, maybe not the whole truth, but enough to take action. Morales closed the folder, the soft thud pulling Ethan back to the present. She's being charged. Between the financial crimes and the attempted abduction, there's a strong case against her. She won't be able to hurt him or you. Again. Hurt? The word felt small compared to the enormity of what she had tried to do. She had betrayed him as a husband, but worse, she had betrayed Liam as a mother. The kind of betrayal that left scars beneath the skin, deep and invisible. What happens now? We'll move forward with the charges. You and Liam might need to testify, but we'll support you through it. And if you need help with Liam with processing all of this, we can recommend someone. Ethan nodded, his thoughts already moving to Liam. How would he tell him? How could he explain that his mother hadn't just left them, she had tried to erase him? How would a 10-year-old boy make sense of that kind of loss? He stood, his legs unsteady. Morales reached out, a hand on his shoulder, a grounding touch. You've got a strong kid, Ethan. What he did, it took a lot of courage. He shouldn't have had to, Ethan whispered. None of this should have happened. Morales' expression softened. No, it shouldn't have, but it did. And you're still standing. So is Liam. That's what matters. Ethan left the station with a fresh ache under his ribs, the weight of the truth settling into his bones. He drove home in silence, his mind replaying Morales' words, the image of the false documents, the new name that wasn't his son's. When he reached the house, Liam was in the backyard, sitting cross-legged in the grass. He was working on something, his hands moving over a small project, his face a mask of concentration. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, and for a moment Liam looked both incredibly young and impossibly old. Ethan stepped outside, his feet crunching against the gravel path. Liam looked up, his expression open, waiting. Hey, Dad. Hey, buddy. Ethan sat down beside him, the cool earth grounding him. What are you working on? Liam held up a small device, wires and circuits threaded together. Just a project. It helps track things, make sure they don't get lost. Ethan's chest tightened. That's smart. You always know how to keep things safe. Liam's lips curved into a small smile, but his eyes stayed serious. Yeah, I try. Ethan reached out, wrapping an arm around his son. You don't have to do it alone, you know. I'm here. Liam leaned into him, just a little, I know. They sat in the fading light, the quiet stretching around them, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan felt a shift. Something fragile, but real. They had been broken, both of them, but they were still here. And that was enough. Ethan felt the weight of the truth settle around them, the air between him and Liam thick with unspoken pain. The backyard was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the grass. Liam sat next to him, his small hands gripping the device he'd been working on. The wires and circuits a tangled mess that mirrored the turmoil inside him. "Liam," Ethan said gently, "I need you to tell me the truth. Did you know what Mom was planning?" Liam's fingers tightened around the metal and plastic, his knuckles pale against his skin. For a long moment, he didn't speak. His lips pressed into a thin line, the muscles in his jaw tense. When he finally looked up, his green eyes shimmered with a vulnerability Ethan hadn't seen before. "I heard her talking on the phone," Liam whispered. "She said we were going to move, that I'd get a new name and a new school." His voice wavered, each word a fragile thread unraveling. "She said Nick would be my new dad." Ethan's breath caught. His mind reeled, imagining Liam overhearing his own erasure, the life he knew slipping away through the cracks of a closed door. "Why didn't you tell me?" Liam's face crumpled, the hard shell he'd worn for so long finally breaking. Tears welled up, spilling over his cheeks, and he wiped at them angrily, as if they betrayed him. "I didn't know how. I thought maybe if I didn't say it out loud, it wouldn't be real." Ethan pulled Liam into his arms, feeling the way his son's body trembled against him. The boy's composure, his eerie calm, all of it had been a mask, a shield against the truth that had threatened to shatter him. "I'm so sorry, Liam. You shouldn't have had to carry that alone." Liam's sobs came in quiet, broken gasps. "I thought if I stayed quiet, she might change her mind, that maybe she'd want to stay." Ethan's chest tightened. "None of this was your fault. She made her choices and they were wrong, but you did everything right. You protected us, you protected yourself, and I'm so proud of you." The words seemed to reach Liam, his grip on Ethan's shirt loosening as the tension bled out of him. "I just wanted to stay with you, Dad. I didn't want to go." Ethan held him closer, his own tears slipping free. "You're not going anywhere, buddy. You're safe, I promise." As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow over the yard, they sat together, the silence between them no longer heavy but healing, and in that quiet, Ethan knew they would find a way through together. Ethan sat in a comfortable but slightly worn armchair, his hands resting on his knees. Across from him, Dr. Ellis, a warm-eyed therapist with silver-streaked hair, offered a gentle nod of encouragement. Beside him, Liam sat cross-legged on the couch, a stuffed dinosaur tucked under his arm. It was the same one he'd had since he was 5, a comforting relic of simpler days. Therapy hadn't been Ethan's first thought, but as the dust settled after Sarah's arrest and Nick's sentencing, it became clear that healing wasn't just going to happen on its own. The weight of what they had been through pressed on them both, subtle and constant. Liam's calm exterior had cracked, but beneath it lay a mess of confusion and fear that couldn't be fixed with silence. Dr. Ellis's office had become a refuge, a safe space where Liam could untangle the knots of betrayal and abandonment. She asked gentle questions, never pushing too hard. She let Liam set the pace, offering tools to help him process his feelings. Sometimes they talked through drawings or played board games that subtly encouraged him to open up. Other days he barely spoke at all, and that was okay too. Ethan had his own sessions, learning how to support Liam without projecting his own hurt. He discovered that his need to fix things, something Liam had clearly inherited, was both a strength and a burden. With Dr. Ellis's help, he found ways to be present, to listen, and to let his son lead the way. Little by little, Liam began to change. The shadows under his eyes faded and his laughter returned, soft at first, then louder, more genuine. He started inviting friends over again, their backyard filled with the sounds of childhood soccer games, giggles, the thud of a basketball against the pavement. Ethan's heart lifted the day he heard Liam and his best friend Max arguing over who could build the best Lego spaceship. The debate was heated but ordinary, the kind of moment that felt like a bridge back to normalcy. He even found himself smiling at the mess of toys left behind, a chaos that felt like a blessing. In the background, life moved forward. Ethan met with a financial advisor, setting up a new college fund for Liam. This time, he made sure it was secure, safeguards, legal protections, everything he hadn't thought of before. His own name was the only one on the account, with backup contingencies that would ensure Liam's future was protected no matter what. It wasn't just about the money, it was about giving Liam a promise he could trust. Their home also began to shift. The pictures of Sarah were gone, not out of spite, but because they needed room for new memories. Ethan and Liam redecorated, painting walls and adding Liam's artwork to the frames. The superhero with the wild red hair found a permanent spot in the hallway, a reminder of strength and imagination. Ethan found himself breathing easier, the tightness in his chest loosening as he watched his son reclaim his childhood. Therapy had become a regular part of their lives, not as a sign of brokenness but as a path to healing. Liam no longer avoided talking about his mother. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions, processing what had happened in a way that showed not just resilience, but wisdom. One afternoon, after another quiet but productive session with Dr. Ellis, Liam turned to Ethan as they walked to the car. "Do you think we'll ever feel normal again?" Ethan paused, considering his answer carefully. "I think our normal might look different now, but different doesn't have to be bad. We're still us, and we're still moving forward." Liam nodded, his expression thoughtful but not sad. "Yeah, I think we are." They climbed into the car, the quiet between them comfortable. As they pulled away, Ethan caught a glimpse of his son in the rearview mirror, his face turned toward the sun, eyes closed, a small, peaceful smile on his lips. It was a snapshot of hope, a promise that healing was not just possible, but real. Liam's room had transformed over the past few months. His desk, once cluttered with drawings and toys, now held a sleek laptop in a maze of neatly arranged wires and circuit boards. Instead of hiding behind his tablet, he immersed himself in coding classes, his natural curiosity finding a healthier outlet. He spent hours building small tech projects, motion sensors for the front door, a weather app that sent notifications to Ethan's phone, even a simple game where the main character bore a striking resemblance to a certain red-handed superhero. Ethan watched this evolution with a quiet pride. The darkness that had once shadowed Liam's every step seemed to lift, replaced by a focus that felt productive, even joyful. His son's coding talents, once a means of defense and control, became a bridge to new possibilities. Liam had joined a coding club at school, where he finally let himself just be a kid, laughing with friends over shared screens, troubleshooting bugs in their projects, and celebrating small wins with a confidence Ethan hadn't seen in a long time. At home, Ethan worked hard to create a space where Liam could thrive. He started new routines, pancake Sundays, movie nights, and weekly walks to the park where they'd sit on their favorite bench, talking about everything from school to the latest tech trends. Their house became a home again, filled with the soft hum of everyday life. Ethan's own recovery was a work in progress. He focused on being present, on building a foundation that felt strong and safe. His job as an accountant provided stability, but he also found new purpose in being Liam's anchor. He no longer saw his role as simply protecting his son from the world, but guiding him through it, helping him turn his intelligence and resilience into tools for a better future. Their journey wasn't without its bumps. There were still moments when Liam would grow quiet, his fingers absent-mindedly tapping code into a blank screen, his mind wandering to places Ethan couldn't reach. But those moments became fewer, and when they came, Liam no longer faced them alone. The story of their lives shifted from merely surviving the aftermath of betrayal to actively rebuilding, not just as father and son but as a team. The air in their home felt lighter, and their smiles came easier. The world, once so full of shadows, began to brighten with the promise of new beginnings. Ethan stood at the kitchen window, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. The yard beyond the glass was bathed in soft afternoon light, the sun filtering through the leaves and casting dappled shadows across the grass. Liam moved through the scene with an easy grace, his laughter a melody that wove through the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the neighborhood. He was flying a small drone, a project he'd built from scratch, its propellers slicing the air in smooth, precise arcs. Ethan's lips curled into a quiet smile as he watched. The boy who had once hidden behind screens and shields was now a picture of freedom. Liam's coding had become more than a skill. It was an expression of his creativity, a way to connect with the world rather than escape it. Seeing his son so at ease, so genuinely happy, filled Ethan with a profound sense of pride. But beneath the warmth lay a thread of something else, a question that had lingered since the chaos of the past year began. Had he saved Liam from the world's cruelty, Or had Liam saved him from his own fear and paralysis? It was a thought that curled around him in the quiet moments, a reminder of how blurred the lines between strength and vulnerability could be. Liam had stepped up when Ethan had faltered, his actions bold and at times unsettling. The way he had protected them, the calculated moves, the unflinching resolve, spoke of a maturity beyond his years. It had frightened Ethan, that steeliness in his 10-year-old's eyes, but now, as he watched Liam pilot his drone with nothing but joy on his face, Ethan saw the truth. His son's strength wasn't just in his sharp mind, but in his open heart. Liam had faced betrayal and loss and had come through it not just intact, but growing, healing. Ethan took a deep breath, the crisp air filling his lungs with a sense of renewal. He knew their story wasn't about choosing between saving or being saved. It was about the balance of both, about learning that sometimes the strongest thing you could do was to let someone else be strong for you. He had learned that from Liam, from the boy who had been both warrior and child, both fierce and tender. As the drone dipped and soared, Ethan let go of the lingering shadows of doubt. The future stretched ahead of them, not as something to fear, but as a canvas yet to be painted. And as the sky shifted into shades of gold, he felt a quiet certainty that, whatever came next, they would face it together. Have you ever discovered strength where you least expected it? How did it change you? Ethan's story is a testament to the resilience found in the most unlikely places. It's a reminder that strength doesn't always look like bravery in the face of danger. Sometimes, it looks like a father sitting quietly with his son holding space for healing. Sometimes, it looks like a 10-year-old boy who chose to rebuild rather than break. If this story moved you, if it made you think or feel a little deeper, take a moment to share your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Your story, your insight could be the comfort someone else needs. And if you'd like to hear more real stories of resilience, hope, and the quiet power of everyday heroes, consider subscribing. Together, we can build a community where every story matters, where every voice finds a place. Because in sharing, we find strength. In listening, we find connection. And in understanding, we find the courage to keep moving forward.